students, faculty, and staff at Florence Middle School. It's my privilege to welcome you to our Veterans Day program. I know Veterans Day is actually tomorrow, so that may have required a little bit of effort for you to take off work and join us today as we celebrate you. And we appreciate your efforts in doing that. I know a lot of our students are connected with veterans that maybe couldn't be here today, but we are live streaming it, and this is being recorded for our FMS Library YouTube channel. So if you know anybody who's missing out today, they can watch it later. But I was thinking about today, I just reflected on how many veterans that I've gotten to know. And I know we have at least one World War II veteran here today. Do we have any others for World War II? All right, just one. I thought about the summer I was turning 17. I got a job at lost the mic. But I got a job when I was turning 17 at a law firm, and one of the attorneys, his name was Erskine Wales. And when I met Mr. Wales, he was an older man, and age and life had kind of taken a toll on him. He walked kind of stooped over. All right, think better. And I got to know Mr. Wales, and he was always super kind. Always had an easy smile. He walked stooped over a little bit, and I can still see him on Capitol Street downtown walking with his briefcase, his coat and tie. And even though he was a little bit older and kind of frail, he always walked with purpose. But he was incredibly kind, and I Googled him the other day. He passed away a number of years ago, but when you Google him, you find all kinds of stories about the good, generous, kind man that he was. And that's who I knew. I got to see him in that light. But if you Google Erskine Wales, you also find that there was a man who served his country as a United States Marine. And in that role, he found himself in one of the worst battles of World War II, which is Guadalcanal. Way to do that on purpose. Erskine Wales was a quiet, kind man, but at Guadalcanal, found himself leading a unit that got pinned down by the Japanese, completely surrounded. And the first article I ever read about him was called The Rebel Yell at Guadalcanal, because in the midst of tough fighting, he told his men, we got to do this hand to hand. And you read about him, and it says that he fought with great fierceness. He just led his men, and against all odds, they were able to overcome the difficulties that they found themselves in. And I thought about that, like Erskine Wales, the nice, quiet, gentle man who served in his church, served in his community, was screaming in the trenches of a war and fighting for his life and was able to win. It just kind of blew my mind, but he's really symbolic of what I think about with a veteran. Somebody who has a life in America that's established. This guy had a law degree from a family of a bunch of lawyers, lots of money and success. And he could have just said, you know what, I'll let somebody else fight in my place. But instead, he served his country, served it with distinction, and he stepped outside of his normal self and did what it took to honor his country and to fight for freedom around the world. That's the spirit that we're honoring today. And we appreciate all you men and women who have put yourself aside to serve our great country. At this time, the Florence High School ROTC is going to present the colors.
on some people that took out of their time, busy time, and thank you for coming. Florence Police Chief Burns, Captain Cannon, thank you for being here. Our Superintendent of Education, Dr. Scott Rhines, is here as well. Our newly elected representative, Lance Barter, is here, and all those people are special and very important, Dr. Rhines. But my special one is what I call her the mama of Florence Middle School, Ms. Beverly Weatherby, our former principal. Thank you.
I put myself back in the program because I wanted to acknowledge a couple of our guests today. District 1 Supervisor Terry Morrison, if you would stand, and Representative Tom Weathersby, if you would also stand. These are Florence sisters. They went to our school and have served our district and our school very well over the last many years in office, and we very much appreciate their support. They always have an open door invitation at Florence Middle School, and I wanted to take a moment and especially recognize them today. Thank you guys for your service.
At this time, we would like to honor our veterans who are living with us today, as well as our students who have invited you here. Thank y'all so much for coming and sharing this special day with us. Jerry Lee, Ranger Service, Air Force, invited by Tate Stewart.
Gary Longo, United States Air Force, invited by Madeline Ellis.
Donald Savell, Army, invited by Mackenzie Farmer.
Jeff and Janice Beckball, United States Air Force, invited by Kelly Beckball.
John Patterson, Army, invited by Bryce Patterson.
Scott Duncan, United States Air Force, invited by Sydney Cannon.
Stephen Robinson, Air Force, invited by Annabelle Robinson.
Joe Powell, United States Army, invited by Katie Nicholson.
Keith Grantham, Air Force, invited by Delaney Cannon.
Bobby Davis, United States Army, invited by Davis Walker.
Dan Trigg, Army.
David Fuller, United States Army, invited by Owen Fuller.
Leah Evans, an Army, invited by Emily Herman.
Eddie Simmons, United States Army, invited by Milo Fusion.
Bill Coach, Air Force, invited by Henry Coleman.
Jerry Berry, United States Navy, invited by Skylar Jeffrey.
Chris Covington, Navy, invited by Mary Grace Willis.
Henry Ross, United States Army, invited by Emmy Ross.
Garth Whitney, Army, invited by Jake Whitney.
David Deere, United States Army, invited by Lily Deere.
Corey Knight, Marines, invited by Kathy White.
Jordan Jones, United States Army, invited by Blake Jones.
Hewlin Williams, Army, invited by Miss Williams.
Timothy Pop, United States Army, invited by Callie and Lexi Hickey.
Kenny Pratt, Marines, invited by Bradley Bennett.
Glenn Kevin, United States Army, invited by Ellie and Marshall Kevin.
Alyssa Armstrong, Air Force, invited by Chloe Armstrong.
Mark Joss, United States Air Force, invited by Jaden Joss.
Justin Salson, Army, invited by Braden Salson.
Bill Irvin, United States Navy, invited by Ryder Trammell.
Murray Carr, Army, invited by Brooklyn Shelby.
Jason Merchant, United States Marine Corps, invited by Walter Merchant.
Christopher Frederick, Army, invited by Casson Frederick.
Ann Moore, United States Army, invited by Jonathan Pritchard.
Byron Critt, Army, invited by Nicholas Critt.
Pete Sanazaro, United States Marine Corps, invited by Carly Moore.
Chris Bounds, Army, invited by Shelton Bounds.
Stan Floto, United States Army, invited by Olivia Wigley and Brent Twins.
Travis Allen, Marines, invited by Reese Pruitt.
Ashton Martin, United States Army, invited by Natalie McLaughlin.
Christian Buchanan, Army, invited by Ella Williams.
Linda Marble, United States Army, invited by Wyatt Swift.
James Hall, Army, invited by Carson Hall.
Sheila Harlow, United States Army, invited by Oakley Harrell.
Aaron Pisarka, Air Force, invited by Lieutenant Pisarka.
James Weaver, United States Marine Corps, invited by Gavin Nutt.
James Long, Air Force, invited by Reese Ego.
Brendan DeRoe, United States Army, Lebanon.
Kamari Young, Marines, invited by Kenny Denny.
Dr. Scott Rives, United States Army, invited by Mr. Sister.
John David Campbell, Navy, invited by Reagan Bennett.
Ryan Whitley, United States Marine Corps, invited by Olivia.
Benjamin Everett, Army, invited by Preston Brinson.
Greg Russell, United States Army, invited by Corbin Russell.
Travis Johnston, Air Force, invited by Maggie Josie.
Shelby Hamilton, United States Marine Corps, invited by Kelsey Henley.
Trey French, Army, invited by Marley French.
Donald Wallace, United States Navy, invited by Colby Owen.
Mike Nations, Air Force, invited by Nevaeh Leonard.
Jim Ball, United States Army, invited by Kylie Ball.
Paul Paget, Marine Corps, invited by Addison Mooneytown.
Larry Pettit, United States Army, invited by Ms. Carter.
Bud Smith, Navy, invited by Mackenzie Smith.
Joshua Kelly, United States Marine Corps and Air Force, invited by Gaius Speed.
Mike McDonald, Navy, invited by Haley McDonald and Jenna McDonald.
Zeke Ward, United States Navy, invited by Braxton Dean.
Frank Ayers, Army and Air Force, invited by Deshaun Ayers.
Latonya Tillman, United States Air Force, invited by Braylon Brown, Shy Jones, and Bree Barnes.
Douglas Moore, Army, invited by Jonathan Pritchett.
Larry Dalton, United States Army, and invited by Bill Cole.
Jack Stradlin, Navy, invited by Molly.
Schaefer. Molly Schaefer.
Molly.
Schaefer.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you to all our veterans. We appreciate y'all. If y'all would, please give them a round of applause.
Chad White began his first term as the 42nd State Auditor of Mississippi in July of 2018. He then won re-election to his first full term in the office after establishing a tough, no-nonsense reputation. In his time as State Auditor, White's team has stopped the largest public fraud in state history, made the largest civil recovery after an auditor's investigation in the history of the office, and concluded cases that collectively led to hundreds of years of prison sentences for the fraudsters. He holds a certificate in forensic accounting, is a certified fraud examiner, and served as a captain in the Mississippi National Guard. The son of an oil field plumber, and public school teacher, White grew up in rural Jones County and went to earn degrees from Ole Miss, the University of Oxford, where he studied as a Rhodes Scholar, and Harvard Law School. Today, he and his wife, Rena, and their children live in Rankin County and attend St. Richard's Church. Please join me in welcoming our State Auditor, Mr. Chad White.
Morning, how are y'all? I want to start out with a question for the students in the room. How many of y'all are 14 years old? Raise your hand. Hands down. 13, 12. One very excited 12-year-old up there. 11. All right, now I want you to do this. I want you to imagine that regardless of whatever age you are 18. I want to tell you a story. There's a guy who's about 18 years old who was born about an hour and a half south of here. It was a long time ago. And when he was about that age, our country was in war. And a lot of people were going off to fight in this war. He raised his hand and he said, "I'll go." At that age, he said, "I'll go." So he picked up, joined the U.S. Army, went off to Texas for training. They taught him how to shoot. They taught him how to move. Then he went off to Europe. Before you know it, he was in North Africa. He was on an island called Sicily. He was in the Mediterranean. He was a long way from home. Couldn't talk to his parents, couldn't talk to his friends back home. All he could do was write a letter, and occasionally the letters would get home, and occasionally letters would come back to him. And that's where he spent a war, fighting Nazi Germany. One day he and his buddies were out, and they're walking along a path, and the Nazis start shelling their position. That means explosions start going off. And an explosion goes off just near him and knocks him down and singes and destroys the backside of his neck. Huge injury. The next thing he knew, he woke up in a hospital, military field hospital. They patched him up as best they could, and they sent him to England, where he spent weeks recovering. And then eventually, After he recovered, they sent him back home again, South Mississippi, about an hour and a half from here. That boy was my grandfather, Julian Morgan. And thankfully, he survived. If that explosion had been just a little bit closer to him, you'd have a different speaker today, because I wouldn't be here. He survived and fought for his country. Now, I want you to ask yourself a question. You all raised your hand when I asked you how old you were. If you were 18 and we were at war, would you raise your hand and say, I'll go? That's what he did. When you think about tomorrow, when you think about Veterans Day, you think about why we're doing this. Why do we get in this gym, and why do we all get together and listen to these songs, and why do we have people come in and visit? It's because these people sitting in front of you when they were young raised their hand and they said, I'll go. They said, I'll go. Why did they do that? Why would you do that? If you were 18 years old, why would you do that? And so we can be safe. My grandfather went to fight over there because there was a very real threat that if we did not defeat Nazi Germany in Europe, they would come here. That's hard to believe for us right now, but that was the fear back then. He raised his hand and he said, I'll go so that we could be safe, so that the next generation could be born. That was the sacrifice he was willing to make. And that's what we ask ourselves on Veterans Day. What will we do to honor the people who raised their hand? And are we willing to do the same thing if it comes to it? My two grandfathers are my heroes. Both served in the Army. It's what inspired me to military service too. But I joined the Air Force, and I don't think they like that too much. Everybody knows the Air Force has the best song, by the way. That's the best song. I'll tell you this story capped it all. Many, many years later, my grandfather was an older man. And he had a stroke when I was a little boy, when I was about your age, some of the younger ones here. And he could not speak after that stroke, couldn't say a word. But every time I would go and visit him when my grandfather had a stroke, he would take my hand and put it on the back of his neck, where that scar was, where that explosion had burned him and cut him up. And he would walk me over to his desk, and he would pull out his desk drawer, and he would show me his Purple Heart. Who knows what a Purple Heart is? Somebody tell me what a Purple Heart is. Right here, yes sir. Bingo. When you get hurt real bad. He would pull out his desk drawer, great answer. He would pull out his desk drawer and show me his Purple Heart. He couldn't tell me what he was thinking, because he had a stroke. But I knew. He couldn't speak, but I knew what he was telling me. He couldn't speak, but he was telling me service to your country is important. He was telling me service to your community is important. He was telling me giving of yourself for some cause beyond just yourself is important. And so I want us to all remember that. Very sadly, when my grandfather passed away, we lost his Purple Heart. Couldn't find him. But I'll tell you something, I believe in God, and I believe that this was a work of God. Last week, my eldest uncle found that Purple Heart just before Veterans Day. I got a picture of it on my phone. And if you follow me on Twitter, I put a picture up there too. He found that Purple Heart last week. And my eldest uncle is a bit older now, so he called me last week and he said, look, son, I need you to come get this Purple Heart, because I'm afraid I'll lose it again. I need you to come and keep this Purple Heart safe for our family. So I went to his house and I picked up the Purple Heart. I have a little boy, he's 8 months old. Can't say anything. Just smiles and grins and eats and poops. One day I'm going to give the Purple Heart to him. And I hope he gives it to his son. That's why we celebrate Veterans Day, because we celebrate the men and the women who raised their hand and they said, I'll go. And that's what I want you to ask yourself tomorrow. Would you have the courage to raise your hand and say, I'll go? That's what we think about on Veterans Day. God bless you. God bless America.
Earlier, I heard, as I was speaking to some of you, the audience, and I didn't know Mr. Jack Spradlin, but I don't mind if you call you out real quick. I didn't tell you I was going to, but I am going to call you out. He is a World War II veteran. I believe he is our only World War II veteran here today. And the many years that we have had this assembly, we've seen those faces, and sometimes you don't see them anymore because they're not here with us any longer. And so we're thankful to have you here. Thank you for being in attendance. But as we pay respects to the brave men and women that have served our military, we are reminded of the sacrifice, as Shad White just mentioned, to protect the freedoms that we hold dear. I'm reminded of the words of President Ronald Reagan: freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. We do pass it on to our children in their bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed down, and them handed down as well. Students and guests today, these thoughts highlight the fundamental truth that we have to remember on Veterans Day. Our freedom, the very essence of our great nation, has been preserved through the dedication and sacrifice of our veterans. Their willingness to serve, to stand on the front lines, to defend our way of life. We certainly can never fully repay that. But in a moment, we are going to play. We're going to have a time of silence followed by the playing of taps. As we honor the fallen, let us also remember the values that unite us as a nation, the commitment to freedom, liberty, and democracy that has made our country great. Let us pledge to carry forward the legacy of our veterans by cherishing these values and honoring their memory. We certainly owe a debt of gratitude to our veterans. It is our responsibility to ensure that those sacrifices, those that made that ultimate sacrifice, will not be in vain. And so let us stand together as one nation, united, forever grateful for their service. May we never forget those who have given their all for our country.
This concludes our program. Veterans, we do have a reception prepared for you in our cafeteria. Students, if you invited a veteran today, please join them on the floor. And if y'all will wait just a few minutes as we dismiss everyone else, then we'll escort you to the cafeteria. Teachers, at this time, take your classes to first block.